we're talking about wage theft. It's a massive part of this industry. It's a conversation that started many years ago and is still ongoing. And it's a term that is very emotive. We're sort of going to unwrap that a little bit.
And we're going to talk about things like superannuation and making sure that people get paid the right amount of money. And we're going to talk about the ridiculous hospitality award. So if you'd like some light reading, download those 80 fucking pages.
Hello, TK.
Hi, Joe.
How are you?
I'm very well. You?
I'm great.
Your beard looks very trimmed.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's taking a lot. I have neglected it a bit.
It was a bit of a beast last time we filmed.
Yeah, there was a
couple of
comments about it. So I apologise to anyone that didn't like the birds that were flying out of my beard. But I'm hopefully back on track with more regular grooming.
Let's throw a comment below whether or not you should get it cut like Dan Bilzerian in the big.
No, I was saying to the barber that gave me the last trim that I've had sort of every single design of beard, and I'm still not sure which one I like. At one stage, I had it like angled right down.
Well, the pointy one.
Squared, had it round. Anyway, maybe it's time to give it a breather, but no.
Oh.
Fuck no. I can't. Absolutely not. It's been too long. I'm not allowed, actually.
I tried to grow mine out a bit over Christmas. I couldn't get past the itchy stage.
It's like you got to get through 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Once you get through 2 weeks. I think you need the time as well.
Yeah.
You know, because I was talking to someone the other day, like, have you ever grown your hair? And I was like, what? And the idea that, because I have a nice little halo, so it could be quite prolific, but it's still as bald as a badger on top. So, yeah.
When I was on the cruise ships, I had to shave twice
That's
a day.
the thing. You need like 6, I would need to be on a cruise ship for 6 weeks or something as a guest, because I don't want anyone to see me whilst this process is happening. And then I'm just going to end up looking like George Costanza anyway. So,
well, I used to have to shave twice a day when I worked at Disney.
Too much.
And I used to have all shaving rash. And then when I started working for myself, I'm like, oh, I'm never shaving.
Yeah. Maybe
at best, it's a clipper.
That might be how this is lined up as well. Because I think, I was trying to work it out, I think it was 2014 I started growing this.
I've got a good photo of you. We should insert it here, Corey, of
God, please don't.
Pete with a nice moustache and nothing else.
Oh yeah, that's a fun one. That was a long time ago. Anyway, we're on a time jam.
Yeah.
We're going to try and punch out some puncher episodes at the minute. So,
what are we talking about today, mate?
Well, I think one of the things that Corey and I were talking earlier about different things to talk about, and the idea of like just picking a topic and sort of riffing on it and sort of seeing where we go. Maybe something that's a little bit current in the media, people are talking about it. And one of the things that Corey sort of mentioned, which it's a really strong 2 words when they're put together. And I wanted to get your take on it, maybe discuss some of the things that, we don't have to mention names or anything like that, but just in terms of what are the things that we're aware of. So the 2 words, when you put them together, that are pretty freaking dire, is wage theft.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say it.
So if they're the 2 words, someone says it, what's your immediate response?
See, it's hard. I think an employer sometimes gets a different, they have a different understanding for it. I don't condone people not getting paid right.
Yeah.
It's actually the opposite. I think it's fine. It's horrific. And I'll go down on record as saying the hospitality industry is a land of broken dreams and promises.
Mm-hmm.
Like just, and you would have seen it. I've seen it.
Yeah. It's happened to all of us at some point in time.
So I get it. And I get why people are very prickly about it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take 5 minutes and look at the hospitality award, whatever fuckwit actually drew that up.
Yeah.
Like, give yourself an uppercut.
You could argue that Satan was responsible.
Man, it's just ridiculous. It's like they just kept adding to it and adding to it and adding to it, and it's just a minefield. Like,
I was talking to someone about this. Just about we're looking at some wages. It's across a couple of the venues, and the conversation was, "Oh, does that talk to that?" And it's like, no, they don't. And it's like, well, why can't they talk to each other? That software, and it's like because the award is almost impossible for anyone to understand, even data software that is there to help.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, do we actually know what that person should have been paid on that day? Now, again, that wasn't the conversation today, and not saying it ever will be, but I think, and straight off the bat as well, 100% people deserve to be paid for the hours that they work. And I think that as a, like me, I went into full-time very early on when it came to hospital. My first job when I was sort of 17 was full-time, and I haven't stopped doing that. So, apart from a couple of years out in golf world. But there was an expectation then as well that it was never 38 hours.
Yeah.
Like your contract says 38 hours, but it's never 38 hours.
And you know what? I think, I would like to think it's certainly at my restaurants. It's that those days are gone.
Yeah.
And I would my advice to any person in the hospitality industry is when they sit down for a job, just be honest and upfront with what your expectations are. And be honest and open with negotiate your pay, negotiate how many hours you foresee you want. Don't say one thing but mean the other.
Yep.
And then make a very conscious decision from that and hold your employer accountable for them.
Yep.
For what the agreement was. But I can't help but get a bit jacked off with some of these social media sites where any chance they get, they'll hammer you.
Yeah.
Over what
you mean like a restaurant or a restaurant group or
I speak freely. There's a bunch of chef social media pages which if an employer, a future employer or a restaurant or a cafe or whoever is advertising for a chef, chasing a chef, they'll post an ad up there and it's just like watch the floodgates open of people ripping the piss.
As soon as someone
a chef to party should get paid double that, or a head chef should be get paid double that, and that's why our industry's fucked and blah 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 blah. Which I get it, but a cafe can't afford to hire a sous chef for $90,000.
Yeah.
So if you're a sous chef in a 5-star hotel looking after 8 outlets and you're used to getting paid $90,000, you probably are overqualified for the cafe sous chef's job, which is paying 70.
Yeah.
It's not the cafe's fault.
Yeah.
But also
that's just the business. It's like if the business can't afford it, then why would you do it?
Just negotiate, but and if the cafe can't afford it, you'll know really quickly. But don't rip the piss. Like it just is what it is. I had a conversation with a chef 3 weeks ago, who came in and wanted a job and happily negotiate, and the pay was good. But he said to me, "Do you pay bonuses?" And I said, I'm happy to look at paying bonuses, but in general, I don't.
Yeah.
What sort of bonuses are you talking about? And he said, well, if I hit with the budgeted labour cost and the budgeted food cost, can I get a bonus? And I said, no, because you get paid
to do that,
to hit your budget.
Right.
And we're negotiating now your salary based on the fact that you're saying that you can hit those things.
Yeah.
If you better them, we'll have a conversation, but...
Right.
You've got to better them in the right way. So you're not just ripping the labour out of the kitchen and you're not buying shit ingredients and all the rest of it.
All of a sudden everything's out of whack.
Yeah. So I said, and let's just say, for round numbers, it was $100,000 a year job.
Yep.
I said if you want bonuses, why don't I pay you $75,000 a year? But if you better the KPIs, you better our budgeted food costs and better our budgeted labour costs, we'll incentivise you with enough bonuses for you to earn 130.
Yeah.
And you're like, fucking no way. It's like, well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. But I'm all about the negotiation up front. And tell me because I find it really hard to start negotiating pays especially for seniors when they don't know what the budget is. So I don't want somebody to take a position, get paid a 6-figure income, but then not have enough labour in the kitchen to be able to support them.
Yeah.
So I try and give them as much data as humanly possible at the start.
Yeah.
So you don't set them up for failure.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing is that, bonuses are fine, and again, I've certainly not recently, but a long time ago, had incentives put in place that were never going to be achieved.
Yep.
Whether they be individual or team.
Yep.
And they're so demotivating as well. Yep. So I sort of get that.
And I think you should ask that at the start.
Yeah.
So then you go in with your eyes open and you can sort of go, well, we all know that, what the industry standard for, the labour cost is.
Yep.
Well, the industry standard for food cost.
Yep.
And if it's in the realms of normal, make a decision based on that.
What is normal?
Look, I know what we run ours at.
Yeah.
And, there's a raft of questions that need to follow. So when we base our labour costs, we don't base it with all of the on costs added on, because
As in super and
there's about 22% on top of your salary,
Yep.
which you have to pay.
Yep.
So we just have our raw salary.
Yep.
So all of those on costs are not
They're
part
not
of
in
it.
there at all.
No. So, and our formal restaurants are obviously different than our fast casuals.
Yep.
So our fast casuals is 22% kitchen labour.
Yep.
And kitchen
So
labour.
that's 22% of the total revenue for that day. 22%.
Yep.
Is kitchen.
Yeah, and that's based off, and that's kitchen hands, chefs, cooks, anyone in the kitchen, anyone the cost to produce that food.
Sure.
And the front of house, it's just all of the front of house. So
Yep.
whether you're your food runner, or bartender, or whatever.
Som, whatever,
And-
they're all just in that.
Yep. And it's 11% front of house.
Yep.
So 33% total.
Yep.
So-
Okay.
And then in the more formal restaurants, it's jacked up, elevated a bit,
Yep.
just by a couple of percent. But food cost is one of those things that we're really, really strong on.
Yep.
And I treat a 1% high food cost like 10,
Yeah.
because I don't see there's no difference. It's either a win or a loss.
Yep.
It's not like, it's only 1%, because I think that's when you get complacent.
Yeah. And then it just creeps up over time.
Yeah.
1% of 1% of one restaurant is one thing. 1% of 10 restaurants is another
It's a lot.
thing. And over time, it's going to add up to huge numbers.
Well, you can picture a really, 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 really busy restaurant like Rice, where 1% is thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you've just got to be really. We are so transparent with our numbers,
Yep.
and we give such live data to all of our managers.
Yep. So they can react.
we give all the tools in the world for them to win.
Yep.
So, and just my advice to anyone in this industry is just hold your employers accountable for it. You don't need to go straight to the ombudsman. You can, and I implore restaurants to speak to the ombudsman as well about what they're
doing.
If they think that they're doing the right thing, but they're for whatever reason they're a little bit unsure, give them a call.
Yeah.
Talk to them.
Yeah.
We use a labour hire company purely for their HR,
Yeah.
and they keep us compliant.
Yeah.
They don't hire for us. They don't fire for us. We do it all.
Yeah.
But we use their HR department and their workplace health and safety arm to make sure that we are legally
Yeah.
on point all the time.
And I think that's a really good point, that all the time thing, because often what happens in restaurants is in a busy day, busy week, busy month, people's hours might go up, they'll creep up a little bit. And then it's like, I'll get that back next week, and then you don't. And then all of a sudden it's sort of 5, 6, 7 hours over, and that's just constant. And it's very easy to go from, let's say, 40-ish hours a week to 45 to 50 without really thinking about it.
Yep.
And I always question people when they say, I'm doing long hours. Like, why? Do you need to be there? Because if you do, then we've got another problem.
Yep.
So there's that's part of it as well. But bring it back to this idea of wage theft, and it's sounding like you as an employer are literally taking money from me.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily what it is.
No, I think it's
Can be. Don't get me wrong. Can be.
Yeah, I think it's more. I think the wage theft, as we know it in the media, for all of the big guns who have been hammered for it, it's one of two things. It's unpaid overtime,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that and or a enterprise bargaining agreement that the staff have been entered into.
Yep.
Knowingly, but that has been outdated.
Lapsed, yeah.
And I think it's 7 years, but I'm unsure. I never realised that an enterprise bargaining agreement needs to be refreshed every few years.
Yeah, and you need to get a certain quorum of staff to agree to it. And that's the thing, that could go, let's say that's a 7-year thing or whatever it might be. The staff that were there that agreed to it in 2005 probably aren't there in 2012.
Yeah.
And then again in 2019 and 2026. So
And I do acknowledge the fact that it's part of the employer's job to know that.
100%.
Like they should know that.
Yeah.
So granted, but I don't think they're actively out there going, don't let's not update this, because what happens if it goes up?
Yeah.
I mean, every time the government open their mouth and they increase wages, we run what we call a boot test on every single staff member to make sure that our pay is right.
Yeah.
And if we're borderline, we'll always go overs.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I don't want somebody knocking on my door in 3 years' time saying you owe me $100,000.
Yeah.
And we made a commitment to ourselves, I mentioned on the last episode, that we wanted to be the best employer that we possibly can be. But I'll be the first person to say I get it wrong sometimes.
Yeah,
we
all do.
And, there's the law protects the staff a lot, as it should. But it also makes sometimes decisions for employers extremely difficult, in particular when you've got a bad egg in your bunch.
Right.
Because back in the day, it used to
it's
be
hard to get rid of people.
Yeah, back in the day, it was, the old saying was slow to hire, fast to fire. Now it's sort of fast to hire, fast to fire.
Yeah.
But the law makes that very,
you mean fast to hire, slow to fire?
No.
You're saying fast and fast.
Because you can't afford to have a bad, especially manager.
Yeah.
Like, it's so cancerous.
Yeah.
Before you know it, instead of losing one staff member, you lose 5.
Yeah.
So it's hard, and I get why the law's there, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but there's just got to be some common sense that come into play. But it's really hard because there's so many people out there trying to rort the system all the time. So it makes the people trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
It makes it very difficult for them.
Absolutely. And I think, I would always encourage anyone, if they ever are having any problems, to reach out to their employer. If they're not sure about something, if it's a pay slip, you can't read your pay slip, you don't understand what it means. I had one recently, one of the girl's friends, she said she was getting paid a very low number. And I said, well, let me have a look at your pay slip. And it turned out she wasn't being paid the wrong number. She was the pay slip didn't show the loading. Yeah. But it was still correct. But the way that she was reading it didn't look like the casual loading had been added and bits and pieces like that. And that's the thing. Sometimes these things are impossible to read. And particularly young people, they're like, I don't know what this is.
And we've had glitches in our payroll system where your accrued annual leave hours has glitched out,
disappeared,
or it was wrong, and then the next week it's righted itself after there's a software update. Yeah. So I think it's really imperative what you said, and that is people that say they don't like confrontation and they don't like talking about money and payroll and stuff like that. It's not an uncomfortable conversation if you're just upfront and honest before it's an issue, because half the time all you're doing is helping your employer. You're not putting the acid on them.
I think it's also that
the tact, the approach.
Exactly. It's always about delivery. I mean, I've probably said it 100 times on this pod, and I'll probably say it 100 times this week. It's always about the delivery. So never start it with, hey, can we have a chat? Because that always generally means it's not going to end well for one person in that group. But, hey, just an email. Hey, have you got 5 minutes? Just want to go through my pay slip with you, something like that. A good employer will always respond to that, and we'll have that conversation. Depending on the size of the business as well, they've probably got someone either in payroll or HR or both that can do that, or like you guys do, someone off site that can be able to get into it really quickly for them and give them all the information they need.
And I can't reiterate enough that if somebody comes to me and says they're applying for a job, they see a head chef's job up, a very senior position, and they come and say, "Hi Tony, pleased to meet you. Here's my CV." This is my experience. I'm chasing 150 grand a year. My expectations, I've got 2 young kids at home. My expectations is out of my full 7-day week, 4 days, out of those 4 days, I only want to work 2 nights.
Yeah.
It's basically a take it or leave it offer.
Yeah.
I'm like, how good's this guy?
Why?
Because he's just given me everything that he wants up front.
Yeah.
And I've got to make a decision.
So you know where you stand.
Yeah, and I know I can openly say to him if that's
within the realms of possibility.
Yeah, because you'll know straight away. If I'm 30 grand apart, I'm going to go, mate, the bridge is way where I'm at 90. So, and the 4 days, great.
Could make that work.
You're going to have to figure that roster out.
Yeah.
But here's our budget. This is the revenue that I'd give him all the information.
Yeah, if you can make that work, then...
Yeah, and if I didn't think it was possible, I would tell him that.
Yeah.
So we don't, get married and then have to go through a divorce within 2 weeks.
Yeah, you're going to find that out pretty quickly. That's the thing. So,
but just be really, really honest and upfront.
I think that's a really good point. The upfront, those conversations at the start, and often... As well, it's a positive process. It's a happy process. I'm getting a new job. This is exciting. But it's always that the next part is like, what's the exit? like if I don't like this, what happens? Or you've got to be prepared for that. You've got to be ready for that as well.
Yeah.
So those conversations need to have at the start, particularly for full-timers, I think, as well. I was having a conversation with someone recently, not in the hospitality industry, about a new contract, and same thing with incentives and you know, potential sweat equity and all these kind of things. It's like, you've got to look into all this because there's other things you need to take into account, you know, tax implications, all of that kind of stuff. It's the same thing as we say, get a good lawyer, get a good accountant, and sort of get someone to run through it, because you can get sort of swept up with, oh, there's a big number in front of the contract. Oh, that's great. But it's like, yeah, but there's a reason why there's a big number there.
Yeah.
Particularly in our industry, because
and I've got an older son, Michael, who he's very entrepreneurial. He's out there having a crack, and he's been offered before equity in different businesses, and I get, as a young fella who's never had a proper hiding before, you know, equity. Oh my God, I can own a piece of this business. But I keep saying, if that business is a pig and it's losing money, and they sign some equity over for it,
then you're in for
the So don't get swept up in it.
Yeah.
So you've just got to make sure that you do your homework, and if somebody offers you a deal like that, surely inside your network there's got to be somebody there that you can speak to.
Yeah.
If there's not, you need to spend a couple of $100 and speak to a lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you don't want to get yourself in the shit, and I've seen it so many times.
So when you said before, with people, particularly like the figureheads who are generally, you know, those guys or girls at the top of that, the food chain, or the face of that business, and often the historical ones that, you know, most people are aware of, that person isn't necessarily the business.
No.
They're the face. And there's the money's come from someone else, an investor of some kind, and then that business then should be taking care of itself, and they're over here doing their thing, and the business should be taking care of itself. But it often doesn't work out like that. What are the things that, like you said, there's no malice necessarily in it happening, but are there any other things that people can do before that becomes a problem? Let's say they're already employed. They're employed currently. They've missed that starting conversation. They're probably doing on average of 10 extra hours a week, okay? Whether it be on the floor or in the kitchen, which is pretty easy to do. It's 2 hours a day, staying early, coming in early, staying late, whatever it may be. And they're really struggling with that. And they've gone to their employer and said, hey, I'm working more than we sort of agreed to, or what I'd like to. What do I do? And the employer's like, no, that's just what it is. What happens now?
Well, you've got to make a decision, you know, and if it was agreed upon that you're only going to work 40 hours a week, but
legally it has to say that, right? You can't say any more than that in a contract.
Well, you can say, I believe it's up to 45 hours a week plus reasonable overtime. Now, that's such a grey area, and I hate that.
That's what I mean. Like, that is so grey. What is reasonable overtime, or as per business requirements?
Yeah, and
that could be 7 days a week.
And I think that it's up to you to then state, I want to get paid overtime after 40.
Yep.
Now, have the fight if you're going to have an argument up front at the beginning, and just say, sort of, I'm willing to do it every now and then, but if it's a regular thing,
then we'll revisit.
Then I'm just going to need to get paid overtime after 40 hours.
I think that's kind of fair and equitable as well. If someone's like, I want the job, I'm happy to put in. You know, you were talking about, you know, Aiden coming in and doing, you know, working for free and that kind of stuff. But there's a difference between that and like maybe half an hour early here and doing his own thing, or
rostered hours. Because we do have young people that want to come in and do another section, and I'm really clear with them that, you know, the business can't afford it, and you got to, any manager's just got to be aware that you don't want burnout in the kitchen.
And that's the thing, because that's the next thing.
Yeah. So if Aiden's on a 10 till 10 shift with a 2-hour break in the afternoon, do I want him coming in at 6 to help the baker bake the bread for the day? No.
Yeah.
But if he's on a straight shift and he's starting at 8, come in at 6:30, come in at 7. And if he wants to donate an hour to help work, but I'll make sure that the head chef's aware of that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want him doing that and then asking him to stay back until 11 o'clock that night and do the dishes.
As per business requirements.
Yeah, because that's bullshit. You know what I mean? But also, go and work somewhere else on your day off and ask for a stage
if you want to learn.
Yeah. I would openly say to Aiden, if you want to learn of somebody, you know, see where Adriano is this weekend and ask him if he can work there for a day, or go down to one of your venues and work there for a day and really see what it's like.
Do you, just going off topic for a second, which is something we're very good at, Corey, isn't it? Do you see people doing stages anymore? Like, is there any chefs coming through that have done a stage, either
not as common
locally or like, because it used to, people would go to Europe or particularly London, obviously.
We've seen it a lot
2000s.
when I was the head chef at the Stokehouse. We've seen it a fair bit. Obviously, the Stokehouse had a massive name.
Yeah.
Every now and then, especially when Dobbers was working for us, we'd get people requesting it. But you've also got to be really careful of that as well, because there is some legislation around that.
Around them working for free?
Yeah, more in around insurance and stuff like that. So you just got to make sure that you're
upfront about that.
Yeah, and I don't want to go stating the law there because I'm unsure of exactly what it is, but just do some homework in regards to if you got somebody staging in the kitchen, they chop their finger off, what happens then?
Yeah.
Or if they get hit by a car on the way home. Or
all of those things.
So just be careful, that's all.
Good advice.
I'm a big believer in that. Go and find the very best person in their craft and go and hang off their side for a day. It's the best way to learn.
Yeah, no, 100%. What about that creep, I suppose, when it's sort of an extra 5 hours, an extra 10 hours, all of a sudden it's 65 hours or 55 hours or, we've done plenty of opens and, certainly the hours don't necessarily count. Particularly when you get to a certain point in hospitality, you go on what's called a CLA. So you're not under the award anymore, right? So you're under a common law agreement. And so those award protections aren't necessarily there. So there's that agreement that, I'll just do what I need to do to get the job done. And I've always been completely fine with that because that's up to me to manage it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work out.
No.
And, historically, again, I've done it before where I'll do 80, 90, 100 hours in a week. And then you sit there at the end of the week and you got to do it all again. And then you become ineffective for big periods of time. And I think that's the bit for me that I'm always saying to people now is why those extra 10 hours? Like what's going on that means you need to do that? Where are we understaffed? The wages aren't reflecting that. So maybe we're just not in the right area. Are we, so there's those things to sort of think about. And the other thing is from those guys' point of view is often they can't control the revenue. They're not the ones looking at the marketing to get more people in.
Yep.
They're not controlling, any of the booking software, and they're just turning up and trying to do their job. So they can't sort of affect things that way, but they can the other way in terms of not being there as long.
Yeah.
What about the other thing, with the hospitality award is the annualized salary thing, where basically people do get paid for all their hours they work, even under those agreements. And certainly I'm aware of people doing it on a weekly basis of making sure that person's getting paid for those extra hours over the year. So it's basically there's a pool of hours across the year that you sort of agreed to, and anything else we've got to manage backwards. It's like, oh my God, this is the same thing.
I think that's a horrible way of doing it.
So hard.
Just if you do 34 hours because it's really quiet, then you're going to get 4 hours of that, 4 hours annual leave taken away from you at the end of the week because you didn't do your 38 hours.
Yeah.
If you did 45 hours, get paid 5 hours overtime.
Yeah.
And just week to week to week to week to week.
So, because I know that bigger businesses, when you're trying to forecast and that kind of thing, if you don't do that, you don't know what you're end up going to get paying. So you're going to have budget blowouts.
Oh, 100%. The hardest part about it is when you open a business because you're legitimately spitballing numbers, but you've got no fucking idea.
Yeah, and projections are one thing. Actuals is a completely different conversation.
And my suggestion to anyone is if they're not prepared to put in way more than normal, don't do it at restaurant opening. Like just
what do you mean? Like as in a person who wants to open a restaurant or staff member?
Both.
Yeah,
like my advice to you, if you came to me and said, I'm going to go take this massive big director of beverage gig in Brizzy and we're about to open 1,000 new restaurants in 12 months, but you don't want to do more than 40 hours, I'm like, don't fucking do it. Have you got rocks in your head?
It's not going to work.
Yeah.
The math doesn't match.
Just like if somebody says to me, I'm 48 years old now, have you had enough of working fucking long hours, 50, 60 hours a week? I'd say don't own a restaurant, don't own a business, because as much as there's going to be weeks where I can reap the rewards of my hard work, but my phone rings constantly, 7 days a week, putting fires out.
Yep.
But I love it. And when you're doing it for yourself, I can't help but feel as though it's a bit different.
Yeah.
But
of course, it's always going to be.
If you're working for somebody, just look for your perfect job and hunt that job down.
Yeah.
But when you're creating something new, That's hard.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some effort and energy before you find that balance and it settles down.
Yeah, exactly.
It always does, as you know.
Yeah, but that can take, months, years sometimes.
Yep.
Particularly if there's like a little directional change here, or we're going to tweak this or tweak that, and all of a sudden, and then when things are bedded in, it's like, okay, that's where it is.
And my advice to all employers is recruit heavy at the start. Make sure you got plenty of casuals on so they can flex, the roster can flex. But when you're employing your restaurant managers and your head chefs and your key leaders, you need to be open with them and say, it could go one or two ways here. So we've got to be ready.
Yeah.
And that means you've got to have flex in that roster.
I think you've got to be, and I think the thing is, well, you've got to be ready for both.
Yep.
Because if it goes crazy, then awesome. Get more cattle. If I'm not calling people cattle, but it's just a word. Sorry, Corey.
I think you just got chastised.
Well, I might do that again. If it's getting busy, get more people.
Oh, probably your thingy.
Yeah. But on the other side of that is if it's not busy, send them home.
Yep.
And be prepared to have some hard conversations about that.
And mate, my last hire, thanks mate. My last hire if you're a casual working in the kitchen or a kitchen hand,
Yeah.
and you're the last person we're recruiting for a new restaurant opening, I just plead with all business owners to be really honest with them and say, this is going to be a top up for our kitchen hand
For the crew.
recruitment.
Yeah.
So I'm anticipating there's going to be somewhere between 5 and 15 hours, but we're hoping for 15.
Yeah.
But I just need you to have a bit of flex.
Yeah.
And, I think if you go in there with that, you're not bullshitting them.
And I think the challenge with that, obviously, is that if you're opening a restaurant, you want it to be busy. You think it's going to be busy. You think that you got the best idea in the world. So you're going to go out there, and to get the good people, you're going to say certain things that they want to hear.
Yeah.
And there's only, and a lot of it might be true as well, but at some point in time, reality has to kick in and go, okay, you know what? We can't do that.
And make sure that you have some flex in the roster in case you shit the bed a bit at the start.
Yeah.
And you thought you were going to be doing 50, 60 grand a week and you end up doing 30. You've got some flex there, so you can peel some casuals away.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, if it goes the other way and it goes bunter, then your casuals are going to reap the reward.
Yeah.
And you've just got to start recruiting and juggling that roster to make sure your labour cost starts to balance out. But you've got to go into opening a restaurant with the anticipation you're not going to make any money for a few months at least, if not a year.
Do you think anyone does, though? Like, actually?
Well,
I've got to say, I don't think I've ever met anyone that doesn't think they're going to make money in a restaurant.
Oh, yeah. I think
unless they've done it 5 times.
Why would you open a restaurant? I mean, I would love there to be a stage in my life where I open a restaurant with no expectations for it to make any money,
but
just
you
for
need
fun.
the money to do that.
Yeah, but I'm like,
so you got to have 10 restaurants over here to pay for the one.
Mate, it's not fun for me. Like, I don't do it for fun. I love what I do, but it's got to financially, it's got to be viable, or else I'll shut that fucker down so fast it's not even funny.
One of the things, again, Corey mentioned earlier today is like, oh, what about this? If I've got $10,000, what, how do I start a restaurant? I was like, well, get 2 more zeros. Which is just like somehow go and find 2 zeros lying on the road, and then you can pretty much get started, depending on what size it is, obviously, which is a bit ridiculous. But
well, my suggestion is, you got to figure out really quickly what sort of, if you think that clearly you've done a business plan, and my suggestion is take 3 months worth of operating costs
of your projected operating costs
and stick it in the bank. And if you don't have it, you can't open it.
Good advice. Coming back to the wage thing, do you think, because the other thing that people often get dogged on is super.
Yeah.
And people not planning for super and not planning for annual leave. And I think that's where, again, in this wage theft thing, I don't know why I'm doing that. It's because I just hate that term for some reason, because I think most people in the industry know that, there's some bad eggs out there. But a lot of it is just literally an accounting error, and I'm not trying to diminish something that's happened to anyone. And there's been some horrible things that have happened, and acknowledge all of that.
But take some fucking responsibility as well, too, right? Like, don't wait 2 years to look at your super and go, "Fuck, why haven't I been paid super?"
Right? Yeah.
Like, look after a month, look after a quarter, look after a year.
Because employers have to pay that, right? It's meant to be paid quarterly, right? So it's just like
But that's going to get harder and harder with one-touch payroll now, because if you're using one-touch payroll, everyone should be using, unless you're getting paid cash, which is just as much your fault as their fault
Yeah.
if you are. But one-touch payroll, it instantly goes to the government. That's why there's no such thing as group certificates anymore.
No, it doesn't. I love that. I love the fact you tax. It's just like boom, it just populates as an employee. If you're an employee,
but the problem is with superannuation is if a business goes bankrupt,
that's the
first. The director is not personally liable for that. It just goes away. It's the first. The biggest creditors in as far as people that get owed money.
Yeah.
The ATO is at the top of the list, and closely followed by superannuation funds.
Yeah, and then suppliers, and then staff will be way down the bottom somewhere.
And now there's even more legislation that's just been rolled out where if you've got debt under $1 million, then you can negotiate with the ATO
for cents in the dollar.
Mm-hmm. There's been several people that have got away with blue murder with that. Is it a good idea? Well, it certainly makes businesses live longer.
Yeah,
but
are they? They're technically probably trading insolvently, potentially, maybe.
Yeah, I just think it's important. Like superannuation, as much as it's hard, whether or not you agree with superannuation or not, you've just got to pay it. It is what it is. The great bit about using AWX Tribe, and Tom Reardon, if you're listening, maybe a cheeky sponsorship might go away. We'll wear a shirt.
I'm not wearing a shirt.
But it's a big publicly listed company, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I pay holiday pay, I pay sick pay, I pay superannuation, work cover, I pay payroll tax in advance every single fucking week.
Yeah.
So we have a global pandemic and we have to close the businesses for 14 weeks. I've got all my annual leave sitting in a bank account.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I ate shit for a few months because that is really, as far as cash flow goes, holy fuck.
Yeah.
That's hard to do that.
Yeah.
But once you're really, really focused in on making sure that you make those payments, it gets very easy, especially when you get a BAS bill.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the other thing I was going to say is BAS as well. You throw that into the mix. But really, if we're talking about people that are not getting paid super, not getting paid their agreed rates, not getting paid by the award, that's just fucked. Simple as that.
It's definitely fucked. But own a bit of it yourself. And I plead with everybody, just keep an eye on it yourself. Yeah. And before it gets too much of a problem, just have a voice.
Yeah.
Have a conversation. And if you don't get the answers you want, then there's so much work out there for good people.
Yeah.
Like there must be
companies that do pay properly.
Your company, guys you're working for must be looking for 20 staff constantly, the same as us. And legitimately, if you are a fucking 7 out of 10 or above, there will always be a job somewhere in our business for you.
Yeah.
So if you are a 7 out of 10 and you are getting ripped off by your current employer,
look around.
Just look around.
Yeah.
Go and find out.
Yeah.
Go and look and do some research. Go and ask some people.
Yeah.
And just have a little bit of responsibility for yourself. Don't stay somewhere and get your ass ripped out for 5 years and then fucking cry a river.
Yeah.
Like, own it. Treat your salary like it's your own business. Because at the end of the day, you're relying on it to feed your family.
Yeah.
There's always going to be grubs out there that are trying to cheat the system. But, you've just got to make sure first and foremost you look after yourself.
Yeah.
But, my hope is that, as we come, I don't know whether we're coming out of it, but this cost of living crisis, this post-pandemic writing, I call it, it's going to get rid of a lot of people that are 5 out of 10. Yeah. And hopefully more people who are legitimately trying to make an honest living out of hospitality start doing the right thing. More and more people start doing it, and it becomes a very well-respected and admired career to go into. That's my hope anyway.
I think that's a good hope. And I think we should finish on that.
Won't stop trying, Pete.
Very positive thing to finish on. We're going to finish with hope. Do or do not, there is no try. That's it for today. What's Wage Theft 101?
Yeah.
Not how to.
If you got any comments, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't be scared. Legitimately open the can of worms. Ask some questions. I'll be as honest as the day's long. I'll tell you my opinion. And if you find it interesting, give us a like and a subscribe, and it goes a long way.
And we'll drop an email address in here, Corey, so that people can send us through. If we've got any questions about that, we'll do what we can. As I said, we're not experts, but we know there's some experience there. We can hopefully point you in the right direction.
We'll give you a number of somebody that can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And rewind this episode back about 20 minutes for that photo of you.
Please don't.
Thanks, mate.